Excellent. Right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Scrutiny Programme Committee. Can I start by asking for apologies for absence?
Thank you, Joe. I don't have any apologies today.
Okay, all right, in that case, I'm going to hand over to you, Kate, to do a roll call.
Chair, sorry to come in. I'm aware of apologies from Councillor Jeff Jones.
Okay, oh yeah, of course, Jeff Jones, yeah. Okay. Right.
Okay, thank you. Let's start with the roll call then. Councillor Cyril Anderson.
Present.
Councillor June Burtonshaw.
Yes.
Councillor Mark Child. Councillor Mark Child, you there? I can see you logged in. Councillor Wendy Fitzgerald.
Yes, I'm here.
Councillor Joe Hale. Councillor David Halliwell.
Present.
Councillor Terry Hennigan. Councillor Hennigan, you there?
You're muted, Terry.
Who did?
Yeah. Yes, I'm here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Peter Jones.
Present.
Councillor Wendy Lewis.
Present.
Councillor Gloria Tanner.
Present.
Sure.
Councillor Will Thomas.
Yes, present.
Councillor Mike White.
Present.
Thank you. Co-optees, David Anderson Thomas.
Present.
Thank you. Alexander Roberts.
Present.
Thank you. Councillor Co-optees, Councillor Chris Holly.
Present.
Councillor Paxton Hood-Williams.
Present.
Councillor Susan Jones.
Yes, I managed to get on now again.
Well done, thank you. Councillor Lyndon Jones.
Present.
Thank you. Okay, we have Cherie Beecher, Public Services Board Co-optee.
Hi everyone.
Hello, welcome. We have invited councillors, Councillor Andrea Lewis, current joint chair of the PSB. Thank you. We have Roger Thomas, Deputy Chief Fire Officer.
Yes, present.
Thank you very much. Councillor Clive Royd, former chair of PSB.
Present.
Thank you. Adam Hill, Deputy Chief Executive.
Present.
Thank you. Leanne Byrne, Public Service Board Support Officer. Okay, Bridge Madderhouse Scrutiny Team Leader.
Present.
Thank you. Pam Milford from Legal Services.
Present.
Thank you. Myself, Kate Jones from Democratic Services.
Lovely, thank you, Kate. Right, I think Mark Child is here because he didn't respond earlier on as well.
Sorry, Mark Child, present. Apologies.
Yeah, I can see you, yes. Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. Can we have any disclosures of personal or prejudicial interest? No? Okay, lovely. And prohibition of whip votes and declaration of party whips. Okay, thank you. So item 4, minutes of the previous meeting. On page 1 for accuracy, page 2, page 3, page 4, and page 5. Okay, we accept those as accurate. So item 5 then is public question time. Do we have any questions at all, Bridge, from the public?
No questions have been received, Chair.
Okay, in that case, we'll move on to the scrutiny of the Swansea Public Services Board. I understand Rob Stewart has sent his apologies because of pressing business around COVID. So can I welcome Andrea, Roger Thomas, Clive Lloyd, Adam Hill, and Leanne. Leanne's here, isn't she? Yeah. Okay, and also can I welcome Sherry Bisha, who's helping us carry out scrutiny as a co-optee for these particular items. So welcome to all. This is the first committee meeting looking at the Public Service Board since we've adjusted the work programme. So it does provide an opportunity to reset the approach to scrutiny. A number of committee members have been involved in the former performance panel, but this topic of scrutiny may be relatively new for others. And although we have the PSB annual report 2019-20, which will provide the main focus for discussion, there is introductory information and advice which has been included in the papers about PSB scrutiny that will help to clarify the overall purpose of scrutiny and areas of questioning, looking at work undertaken previously by the performance panel. The committee has the opportunity to hear from, question and discuss the work, achievements and performance of the PSB, and particularly focus on the annual report if you wish as well. So is somebody going to just give us a brief introduction to where we're at with the PSB? Either Andrea or Clive, possibly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Clive?
If I kick off, Chair, and apologies, I have to leave just after 4:30 myself for some other meetings with my cabinet roles, but I will kick off the review, I suppose, or the paper. Yeah. So I was chair for the whole of the annual report, going in for 2019-2020. I suppose a couple of highlights that I would pick out is, and very much one of embedment, I guess, was that under the previous chair, Andrew Davis, who was chair of Swansea Bay University Health Board, we started a governance review of the Public Service Board, and that is referenced in the annual report. So it was looking really of how we could approach the Public Service Board going forward to give it more direction, to give it a better way of operating, where we could make decisions in a faster and more succinct manner, I guess, is what we were trying to achieve. And out of that, we came up with a structure which was based around a joint committee based on the statutory partners plus invitees from organisations which we felt were pertinent to the items that we were discussing at any given time. Sitting underneath that would be a partnership forum, which would be made up of many organisations that were felt either had previous involvement directly with the Public Service Board, or organisations that were we felt could add value to the Public Service Board at any given time on any given agenda item, topic that we felt was pertinent at the time based on our well-being plan. So we managed to, before the coronavirus crisis, we managed to have a number of joint committees and indeed a partnership forum, which was our first attempt really of getting that element together. And I guess the other thing I would say about the partnership forum was what we were trying to engender was a co-production type methodology. So although it didn't meet as often as some of the attendees would have previously met on the Public Service Board, it was all meant to be around a co-productive methodology, meeting not so often, but in a more cohesive and joined up way about that co-production strategy. So the governance review was very much, for me as chair, taken over from Andrew Davis, was about embedding that through the early part of my chairship. The other thing was we had out of the well-being plan that we spent a significant amount of time preparing and consulting on were a number of objectives and actions, and Adam will go into a bit more detail about the scale of those. But out of that governance review, the decision from the partners was about focusing on four key objectives, four really important objectives that all the statutory partners felt that they were the things that were really needed to the Public Service Board to focus on, in line with as I say, our well-being and future generations objectives as well. So that was about early years, living well, working with nature, and strong communities. And the council were responsible for two of those, and our statutory partners around were responsible for the other two, so around the health board and the fire service. So I think there was a willingness as well and a desire for the objectives to become very much a foundation for all the organisations. So what you will see from the annual report around the objectives and the various times that we've reported on updates of the objectives has been very much embedding that within the organisations that are part of the Public Service Board. So joint objectives, joint embedment within those organisations. And I think if you look at some of the examples that have been quoted, you will see that as time has gone on, those are very much that embedment has very much taken place. So the responsibility of the Public Service Board to keep reviewing and on an ongoing basis. Our sign of success is when we get performance results and we can look at performance where those are embedded across the four statutory organisations and any partners that we felt were relevant at the time. And I think to an extent, I'd like to think that is something that has been achieved. I suppose the other thing that stands out for me is about what we've tried to make ourselves through the governance review more agile and able to deal with issues that partners feel are really important at the time. May not be a long-term objective necessarily, but something we're able to come together with and deal with in a sort of task and finish type strategy. So an example would be around community safety and the critical incidents groups that we set up around county lines, for example, which I think is a really good example of lots of agencies coming together and lots of and being able to make some real impact in a short space of time. So I think the flexibility that the PSB now has certainly been one of its successes, and I know that Councillor Lewis and Adam might want to touch on how they progress in that sort of methodology around community safety going forward. Obviously, I couldn't finish the annual report without mentioning COVID, and I'll be totally honest with you. Certainly during the first wave of COVID from March to May, end of May, June, the Public Service Board didn't meet, and I think that's one of the things that I would pick out about regional working is that not everything has to come through the Public Service Board. Do I think the Public Service Board contributed a huge amount specifically during the COVID crisis? Then the answer has to be no, because we didn't meet. Did regional working, which falls under the some of the strengths of the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act, did that regional working play a massive part in our response to COVID? Then absolutely yes. So I think the message for me is that there are a number of forums which sit outside the Public Service Board, which were able to come together to formulate a response, not necessarily through the Public Service Board. I suppose we could have pulled a meeting together, but it would have been very much a duplication. So the various regional partnership boards, command structures that were put in place between some of our senior partners were instrumental in a COVID response, but not necessarily through the Public Service Board. So they're very much embedded as the regional methodology of partners working together is very much our strength. And that may be one of the areas that the Public Service Board wants to look at going forward, is whether we continue to have solely a Swansea Public Service Board, whether there's a case to be made for a more integrated regional partnership board I would suggest is one of the learnings out of the COVID response going forward. So I'll leave it there, Chair, if that's okay. That I think I've covered some of the key elements that I want to say as part of my term as a Chair of the Public Service Board. Governance review, embedding the 4 objectives as business as usual, making the Public Service Board more agile to enable it to react to things that partners want to, I think, are important at the time, i.e. critical incident groups. I think those are the key things that I would pick out of my term as chair. But I know that Councillor Lewis and Adam may want to touch on some other aspects in terms of the thinking of the future of the Public Service Board post, certainly in the immediate COVID scenario, but post-COVID as well.
Thank you, Clive. Andrea or Adam, do you want to add anything to that?
If I can bring Adam in shortly, but just to advise Scrutiny that obviously I've only recently been put in place as chair of the Public Service Board, but I'm pleased to say that we're already noting significant progress. We've got 3 suggested priorities post-COVID recovery already agreed: City for Wellbeing and Wildlife, Green Climate Change Agenda, and County Lines Substance Misuse and Antisocial Behaviour, which we feel are areas that all partners can contribute to and we can have significant collaboration on. And as members will know, we had the climate change report brought to council recently, where the climate charter was referred to, and the intention is that in the new year we will be bringing the climate change charter to the Public Service Board to encourage our Public Service Board partners to also make a commitment and sign the charter on behalf of their organisations and therefore formulate their own action plans. So the Public Service Board have agreed that those areas are areas that we want to concentrate on, and as Clive has referred to, clearly there are areas which we have commonality with Neath and Talbot, and so the joint Public Service Board, I use tackling substance misuse as a prime example. We know that this is a regional issue, and I think there are significant benefits to us working across border and working with our neighbours to tackle this issue together. So I'm not going to say much more than that, Chair, because obviously I've been recently in post, and I look forward to probably 12 months down the line coming back to you with a report similar to what Clive has done. But I want to pay tribute to Councillor Lloyd for his time as chair. I think his introduction speaks for itself. The Public Service Board have made significant strides, and I look forward to continuing to build on that work going forward.
Thanks, Andrew. I think we actually have 2 goes each year at the Public Service Board, so you might be back quicker than you think. Adam, did you want to add anything?
Thank you, Chair. I'm having a few technical problems, so please let me know if I drop out or you can't hear me. Everything that both Clive and Andrew have said, I won't repeat. I think it's just important that across the 4 wellbeing objectives of early years, live well, age well, working with nature, strong communities, it is that co-production. And I think it's worth mentioning that certainly during COVID, that the networks and relationships that have been built up through the PSB enabled a better response, and that already co-production on a number of projects helped each of the partners already have the connections, the networks, not only in terms of our COVID response, but also in the wider response that we have available across things like the high street and some of the stronger communities networks, thinking about what happened during the bonfire night in terms of working with the fire service, in terms of identifying where early fires were going to be established and then being able to respond to those with our own teams, working in partnership across the area. I think it's certainly worth pulling out a few key points, if I may, over the 4 areas of the wellbeing. So early years is on within the report itself, page 14 to 19, and page 54 of your scrutiny pack. that in terms of how do we make sure that we offer the best start in life, I suppose, is one of those things. So Skip Maithrin, helping children's fundamental motor skills, helping children build a movement, vocabulary that will serve them going forward. 30-hour funded childcare offer, again, enabling childcare providers to enable access to childcare for 3-4-year-olds to support each child's individual needs. So identifying the child at the heart of what we do, and then getting all agencies around that to make sure we can identify what their needs are. Non-flying start training, again, utilising the skills from across the boards, identifying how the childcare settings can gain access to quality training through both the private and third sector childcare also, so not just our own, and understanding providing regard for additional learning needs, ALN. So again, looking at perhaps the more challenging childcare settings and what they have to achieve. So and then the Best Start campaign, looking at how we can help parents give their children that ready to start in school, what kind of activities they can do at home in order to prepare and advise and get them encouraged and ready for school. Moving on to Live Well, Age Well. Again, big conversation, county-wide forums, over 795 children and young people participated in the big conversation. And that also included older people to work that multi-generational basis to really get those links together. So again, looking at alternative education, city redevelopment, housing, homelessness, stronger communities, working with nature were all topics covered in that big conversation to ensure that it was captured in terms of the information. Then moving on to working with nature, we have the green infrastructure stakeholder engagement events. Over 630 face-to-face conversations have taken place with targeted sessions across the council and some with other partners. There's the urban tree planting scheme and the Swansea Tree Forum playing a key role in this and facilitating collaboration between community groups, voluntary sector, organisations and public bodies. There's the Swansea Environmental Forum and Environmental Centre. They collaborated and organised a programme of events with funding with Natural Resources Wales and support many of the Working with Nature partners. And there was a series of well-attended evening public talks and discussions. Moving on to stronger communities. Again, criminality and antisocial behaviour, substance misuse, drug dealing and county lines, street sex working and exploitation of vulnerable people, and public realm were the 4 areas that were broken down by the Safer Swansea Partnership to be key responses. And this fed through and was overseen by the PSB to ensure the delivery of joint working cross-boundary in some areas, as Andrea already mentioned, with Neath Port Talbot, as part of a regional approach on things like county lines, substance misuse. By working together, we have the same issues, the same problems, a lot of the same third sector partners and other agencies, means that they can tackle this collectively rather than trying to do it differently in each part of the organisation. This also led to lots of links and intelligence sharing throughout the PSB partners, the wider partnership forum, and our third sector and other partners. We've also seen the improvements to the high street more recently, not I appreciate would focus within this, but within this report, but did start within this report. And Clive will remember going to see a number of shops at the top end of the high street on the Defatti end. And again, a lot of time has been taken in order to get this on board, but we've now managed to acquire these shops and we'll be able to turn it into a facility for our third sector partners, the South Wales Police, ourselves, to work together to be able to meet the needs of those that are most vulnerable, the street workers and so on, in order to be able to respond, help and support each of those areas. So, as you'll recall, I think over a year ago, I think I came to one of the scrutinies, and at the time we were known as the worst high street in Britain. A year later, we were called back and were given in the top 3 of the best high streets in Britain, and recognised for the great work that has been undertaken in terms of proving what we can do when we work together as a PSB and wider partnership. And again, without the PSB, much of what I've just said wouldn't take place, because it is that partnership sharing, coming together, sharing intelligence, working together in order to make that happen. And I think it's also fair to say that in terms of the PSB, we are not a fund holding organisation, so we do not have money ourselves. We don't pool resources in terms of a central pot. What we truly do is commit resources from each of the partners in order to make this work. So it's not just tip some money up and hope somebody else will organise it. This is each of the partners, the statutory partners and invited partners, coming together to commit their resources and also follow through in terms of that delivery. And as Clive spoke earlier about the governance review, that's how it was set up, so that it's not about money. So each of the 4 strategic aims are picked up by one of the statutory partners each, and is resourced by that partners in terms of administration, which was a change to what it used to be in terms of predominantly was a council administered and run function, and now it's actually shared and gets an even better membership attendance on the back of that true ownership. So I'll stop there, Chair, but I thought it was worth just pulling out some of those key elements from within the 4 work streams.
Thank you, Adam. I was interested in what Clive said earlier about the response to COVID being more an informal partnership and an effective one, as opposed to working through the PSB. Is it you get instances where the PSB is possibly constraining joint action, and sometimes these more informal relationships work better?
I think if I can, Chair, I think what we recognised certainly during the COVID is that there is a place for structure, and that was in this instance through the South Wales Local Resilience Forum, the SCG, in terms of their statutory function, and as a Category 1 responder that we have a place around that table, as do the police, natural resources Wales, and so on. So it seemed to make more sense than rather than duplicate, is to allow the LRF in order to deliver that function, while we work more locally on the ground with that more informal basis to make things happen, to pull partners together when we needed to, which with both fire, police, National Resources Wales, we did that on a regular basis as and when the need was there. So we could be very specific to how we deployed resources rather than the duplication.
Okay, fair enough. Right, so I've got June Burtonshaw indicating. Can other people indicate if they wish to come in as well, please? June?
Thank you. Can I thank the 3 speakers that have given us some background? But I'm new to this board. Could you clarify what is the remit of the Public Services Board? 1, and 2. Adam talked about High Street and what has been done there. Can you give us other instances on work that's been done that we can see on the ground?
Who wants to come in? Clive, Adam?
Yeah, I'm happy to pick up the first bit. I mean, the remit was quite easily set out within the Future Generations Act in terms of public services working closer and better together to cease duplication and to look at how we can co-produce and be more efficient and effective in what we do and how we do things. So the PSB was pulled together with the 4 statutory partners in order to make that happen, and then on top of that to bring in other either invited statutory partners or other partnerships that could add value to the public services in terms of working together. in terms of what you can see on the ground, I mean, much of that that I explained earlier. You know, if we look at things like the high street, which I mentioned earlier, not only are the new shops coming online, we have regular with the Swan project, regular vans out, substance misuse. There's the needle exchange program, which has been enhanced up into the top of the high street. Again, during COVID, we were doing food parcels to those that were most vulnerable. We have a cleanup campaign, bringing shops and retail units back into either service or supporting the community in those areas. We're working with the housing on the ground up at the top of the high street in the flats. The problems that were encountered through either people using substances in the area, antisocial behaviour, and responding to those, utilising the networks that we have within housing to keep residents informed, and also to help us be informed by any problems that the residents were having within that area. Certainly within working with nature, that I explained, you know, the green infrastructure, stakeholder events, 630 face-to-face conversations. We're seeing lots of urban tree planting. Again, a lot working with nature in terms of helping the design of the new green lung, if you like, of the new city centre phase 1 development. Heavily involved in that through the green spaces. There are the men's sheds, which again have been supported by the various groups and the PSB. Lots of work done by the Environmental Forum through the PSB, and working with Natural Resources Wales and the Fire Service. Part of a £25,000 pot, which was put forward by Natural Resources Wales, had to bid for through the PSB as a partnership, and the fire service were able to secure a considerable sum of money in order to aid fire breaks up on Kilvey Hill and some of the major areas that we've been damaged. You know, most of you will be aware of the fires that happen every year up on Kilvey Hill, and this is to put in fire breaks across that area to prevent any future devastation on the back of fires that inevitably will happen. And then I won't go through them all again, but there's lots of work happening if you're in and around that area with Skip Mathrin, the 30-hour childcare offer, and so on, Flying Start. So if you're in that child environment, then you would be able to see those on the ground.
Yeah, can I just come in as well? I think there's a couple of things with this, June, that I would pick out. One of the things, you know, if you go back to previous entities of this type of structure, sort of local service boards and that, one of the criticisms, one of the things I found is that it took an inordinate amount of time, it seemed, to achieve anything. So some of the things of the local service board, and indeed, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn, Adam. I think it would probably may even be before your time. I think what we had to be really conscious of, that we didn't fall into that mode, was that it was, you know, tackling poverty can be a generational thing. It's not something that happens particularly overnight. So we wanted to get a strategy where those things, you know, we want to make a difference long term, and that the well-being plan and all the work that went into the well-being plan was built on what was important to the people of Swansea. And you'll see plenty of actions, long-term actions in those documents. But I think what the report has picked out is as I said in my introduction, two things really. Things that we've taken on that have now become embedded. So you'll see all sorts of examples in the annual report of things that have now been joint actions that have become embedded. But I really do think that the difference between the Public Service Board and the Local Service Board is the ability to react quite quickly. So, you know, I'll go back to the one that I was heavily involved in, probably into the previous year, but certainly finished within my term as a chair, was the critical incident group, the joint PSBs. There were actions in there around particularly the county line sort of stuff, and the outreach work that took place that wouldn't have happened without the Public Service Board. That brought different agencies together, particularly drug-related agencies and agencies that were used to dealing with outreach through in a very short period of time, and actions that are still in place now, even though that the critical incident group is finished. So there's examples, really tangible examples of, I suppose we're going to have long-term objectives. There'll be stuff that we do in the medium term, but the beauty, I think, that that Adam has outlined is that we really are able to deal with things now in a more agile way. And there are examples through the joint PSB work and the critical incident group around county lines and the high street stuff that is making a difference now in a short space of time.
Okay, Roger Thomas, you want to come in as well?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to reiterate and some of the issues that Clive and Adam have touched on there. I think if I can just pan back a little bit, and perhaps it would help in terms of context. The legislation came in 2015, obviously, with the wellbeing assessments. Then we actually went live in terms of a plan in 2017. So I think it's very much early days in terms of the working together. We're still in those sort of learning and reviewing what we've done. I think our successes have broadly, as Clive and Adam have outlined, have been around the sort of either the sort of crisis issues around county lines, around male suicide, around some high street regeneration and the like. Those have been the sort of successes, but they are fairly short term and pressing need, as opposed to what is articulated and outlined in the Act, which is around generational change, which is, clearly, I think some of the issues in around that and addressing some of those things are structural and financial in terms of our funding comes through annually. Political terms are then 4 or 5 years in the making, and then generational change is 20, 30 years down the line. So it's a significant challenge to match some of our ambition and the funding around those long-term goals. I think the challenge for me. I think it's quite a cluttered landscape as well, in terms of a lot of the funding goes into RPBs, and also we've got corporate joint committees that are starting to come onto the horizon as well, and a consultation for those as well. So collaboration is often not coterminous. It's challenging to get involved in those things. And I would speak, and I am in a minority of one on the line, that I'm not solely aligned to Swansea City Council, although I live in Swansea. Within Mid and West Wales Fire Rescue Service, we cover 6 public service boards. So for a relatively small organisation, managing that across 6 is challenging. And I would like to explore, and I know there's an appetite within Swansea in terms of identifying broader collaboration in and around partners, because when I go over the border into Neath Port Talbot, a lot of their areas are very similar in nature, and we find ourselves, particularly as a relatively small organisation, duplicating a lot of work, which I don't think is good from a public purse perspective. And I think some of our successes, particularly in the critical incident group, have been when we have worked together, identified common areas of need, and brought our sort of our thinking together. So yeah, that's just some observations in terms of the last 3 or 4 years of working at this. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Andrea.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I'm having a bit of trouble turning my microphone on. Yeah, just very quickly, if I can support what Clive has said in terms of the critical incident group may not be continuing at the moment, but actually the work is. And I, with my housing hat, I've been very much involved in working with multiple partner agencies at the top of High Street, and that work is ongoing, and that was instigated by the PSB. There's no doubt about that. So that is a really good example of the value of the PSB and its achievements to date. The other thing I'd like to mention, and I fully support what Roger has said. I think working as a joint PSB makes perfect sense. There is a lot of commonality across our boundaries with Neath and Port Talbot. Obviously, we all want to avoid duplication, but there's also a lot in terms of merit, in terms of working together with Neither Talbot across the region. And I look forward to attending a future scrutiny meeting where I can give you a bit more flesh on the bones and a bit more background, particularly in an exciting proposal that we're currently looking at, very early days, in terms of tackling substance misuse and county lines, working very closely with the police and health specifically, but very much across the Public Service Board partners with a joined up approach. So I look forward to bringing that detail to a future scrutiny meeting for your benefit. But there's definitely some real advantages to us working together in partnership, and very exciting times, and hopefully will make a massive difference, because we all know how detrimental county lines is to our communities at the moment. And I don't have to advise ward members of that, because I'm sure you're all seeing it in your wards. So any inroads that we can make towards that, I'm sure will be more than welcomed.
Okay, thank you. I'm not going to have 4 answers to every question, otherwise we're going to be here all night. But June, did you want to do any follow-up at all?
Can I just thank the members for such a detailed response, and I look forward to further in the future.
Okay, thank you. Lyndon, you want to come in next?
Yeah, great, thanks. I was surprised actually to hear that the PSB hadn't met during the COVID crisis, because obviously one of the most serious crises to hit our country, probably in generations, not recently. Listening to a lot of the work that has been done, and good work has been done, there's no question, but a lot of it is duplication, and it could be and should be done elsewhere. All this costs money, and we'd be better off really concentrating on where the work needs to be done, rather than duplicating and in a lot of the instances that I've heard this afternoon.
Sorry, okay. Chair, just as a point of clarification, the Public Service Board have met during COVID.
Well,
they met in October, didn't they?
Yeah.
And in fact, the minutes are in your agenda. Yeah.
But even so, as I say, there is a lot of duplication, and we just heard now from earlier about the CJCs, which is going to be more duplication. And we just must, like committees, all our money goes on this, where we really should be spending it on the front line.
Okay, just Clive, you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I think obviously Andrew's just mentioned the fact that we have met during COVID, and that was important. I think what you have to remember is that during the very early stages of COVID, that there were bodies in place that met a very early stage to coordinate a COVID response, and these tended to be around a health board focus, regional planning board focus, and agenda. What we didn't want to do is exactly what you've said, Lyndon, is duplicate any of the effort. And the Public Service Board has a role, but as I say, it's more to do with the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act, which is a sort of a more medium, longer term objective. So it didn't make sense to have meetings for the sake of meetings, and certainly as officers and lead politicians, we didn't want to have meetings that were where things were being picked up by other avenues. Listen, I think the Public Service Board definitely has a role in terms of that collaboration agenda, that co-production agenda. It meets and brings together organisations that other bodies don't bring together. So if you look at the remit of the Partnership Forum, it's very much based on co-production around the sorts of organisations that really need to be involved on some of the things that and have a say on some of the things that the Public Service Board has set out in its wellbeing plan. So I don't think there's any duplication here. And listen, if you want to get into a political argument about joint governance committees, that's fine. But I mean, joint governance committee, in my view, is just something that Welsh Government are putting in place to deal with, to try and avoid the duplication that you're talking about it was either that or reduced number of local authorities, and we know why the rationale for reducing the number of local authorities came from, and that was reduced budgets to local authorities around the amount of money that is spent on local government through 10 years of austerity. So we can go down that agenda if you want, but I'd rather not today. Public service boards definitely have a role.
I don't think we're going to get involved in a debate on the reorganisation of local government at this point, though. I don't think, Clive, the driver was what you were saying it was. Alexander Roberts, you mute at the moment.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, sorry, just unmuting and getting ready. Thank you. So my question relates to the what was an objective back in 2017 from the assessment that took place in terms of canvassing what was important to people with regards to well-being, and informed the planning for the PSB for the couple of years afterwards. Just to say, I'm the primary schools representative, a co-optee on this panel. For Swansea, and I'm really interested in measuring progress. So I've heard a lot about some of the big challenges being generational, particularly around poverty. So education is probably one of those challenges. How you can't fix things in a year or in a couple of months. But I'm very interested in one of the objectives, which was progress in readiness of children to attend school. As a member of the Scrutiny Performance Panel for Education, we are increasingly seeing more and more children not being ready for school, and it's a real problem for all of the reasons that you can guess, not least attainment, but also because it feeds through to the problems around substance misuse and all those other criminal activities that you are tackling in the PSB. So I'm looking at those root causes. Of course, you can't sort out and solve those root causes, but an objective was to remedy and improve progress in readiness of children to attend school. Now, with your latest plan, it's really, you've got Flying Start, Jigsaw, Skip Method, and all that kind of stuff going on. Your assessment, your latest plan is really kind of dropped this element, and it's more focusing on the health aspects of readiness for school, which is fine, okay, as long as that's grounded in fact. But I'm really interested in how you measure progress against your target, because you're so interdisciplinary and multi-agency that almost, all of those benefits that the members said that of the PSB to date, been within those divisions that attend at the PSB, and might have happened anyway. I'm not sure, and nobody could ever say. But how do you measure progress across these kind of fronts at such a high level with such a multi-agency approach as yours?
Who's coming in on that one?
Do you want me to start and see how we get on?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think it's a very fair point, and you've mentioned many of the things that we're doing in terms of on the ground and how is that happening and what's being done. As a PSB, what we do have is a performance and monitoring program around everything that goes forward. So we have an action log that is based within each of those work streams. There's a strategic responsible person, which is the necessary agency that works through that work stream and then submits that on a monthly basis in terms of actions. So that's a highlight report. So within there, it talks about project area overview, links to other work streams, risk matrix, and identifying what the risk is, any mitigation, what are the actual achievements and what are the outcomes, the challenges, the barriers, what they're going to work on into that next period, who else needs to be involved, sort of stakeholders if they're not in, what other stakeholders can we bring through, what level of communication needs to be undertaken, is there something through the PSB, through a partner, through ERU in education, where would that sit in terms of that wider comms, and then any actions that are required for escalation. So if there is a barrier somewhere within that work stream, that would then get escalated to the PSB to then open those doors. So there is a very kind of hierarchical structure around that performance that the PSB would go through. I don't have the detail in that work stream other than what's in the report, because it would need that strategic lead to give you specifics within each of those areas, but from a high level, we do monitor all the outcomes. So on top of that, just as a final point, we get together as the strategic lead. So there are 4 strategic leads for one for each of the work streams. We also on a monthly basis get together to look at what's happening, what's effect, how can we work better together, is there something new happening, is there some way that we could be more efficient and effective working together. So and again, those 4 strategic leads are the glue, if you like, that brings all the 4 together in order to be able to move something forward. So hope that gives you that sort of performance level of context.
Okay, Roger, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just add on to what Adam said. I think PSBs are always set up in terms of looking at long-term issues, generational problems that are extremely complex in nature. And also very, very difficult to measure in terms of outputs, and some of those improvements perhaps won't be seen. And some of them are counterfactual as well in terms of measuring what hasn't happened. In terms of what children perhaps haven't been impacted through poverty, or what haven't been impacted through some of the county lines or the male suicide, or all those sorts of things. So it is a really complex area. It's a good question, but it is. I think we find it challenging to actually put it down in a true sort of performance management sense, where people like outputs and widgets counted and that sort of thing. So and I think we do find it challenging to actually sometimes to articulate exactly what the benefits are. But yeah, it's again, it's not a reason not to do it, but it is. We do find that challenging as a strategic board.
Yeah. Do you need to come back, Alexander?
Only to thank the members for their answer. I totally understand, and sometimes the trouble is that it's only those things that really get the public's imagination that can drive policy sometimes, and these are very difficult, thorny things. But if you guys aren't accountable for it, who is? And that's the reason that you've been brought together. So really looking forward to progress in those areas, please.
Okay, thank you. Paxton.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to follow up really in terms of what Alexander's been saying in that sense, because a number of us, you'll be aware, have been involved in scrutiny of PSBs for many years now, and the LSBs even before that. And one of the problems that we have had in terms of scrutiny is that we've never really seen any performance data coming forward to show where the improvements have been made. Now, we've heard a lot about things that have improved in Swansea and the surrounding area over a period of time. High Street is a classic example, and may well be that is the case. I don't know, because I very rarely go up there, but I assume it has improved. But we've got no measure of that. We don't know what is exactly happening. And in terms of what Alexander was saying, in terms of targets that have been set previously for preparing children for school, we should be able to have some sort of monitor of that in terms of statistics to show us that there's been improvement or there's not been improvement. And if there hasn't been, why not? If there has been, what can we build on to improve it? And that's the sort of question I think we've been coming at for some time. We get no real indication at all of the effectiveness of these bodies, because the performance data isn't there to back it up. It purely tends to be subjective. And Lyndon has also mentioned CJCs, but we are beginning to run out of acronyms at the moment, and I'm not going to go into that now, but certainly we do need to know when we are going to get some performance data so we can actually see and you can demonstrate the effectiveness of the PSBA. Thank you.
The one thing 36 years of policies has taught me is you'll never run out of acronyms. Who wants to come in on that one? Clive, do you want to respond to that?
If I can just come in first,
okay.
If I may, I think Paxton, absolutely right. I think Alexander and yourself, how do we monitor performance? How do we really know what difference we're making? In the actions so far in the last 2 years, we've had over 130 actions that we've been trying to work through. And it's left us as a PSB really thin on the ground in terms of meaningful actions. It was probably a bit too low level. And part of the reason for the governance was to lift ourselves back up and look at how we can make that bigger difference, look at the performance, look at how we can monitor what we are going to do, what are the outputs, both short, medium and long term. So I think it's work in progress. I'm not going to try and sit here and defend the level of performance that we've given, because there hasn't been. What we tend to show is, and Roger mentioned it earlier, in terms of what we have done, things like the critical incident groups, is that we respond to an urgent issue, we come together and we deal with it and come out the other end. What the PSB was really about is that generational change, and that Andrea mentioned right at the start, that we are refocusing in terms of what we've learned over the last 2 years, and we were about to embark on another wellbeing strategy. But thinking about those 4, and what would the metrics be around that, and that's what each of the work streams are currently working on. So City for Wellbeing and Wildlife, Green Climate Change, Counterline Substance Misuse and Antisocial Behaviour, there are definite metrics that will come around those that we can show in terms of progress and outcomes, both short, medium and long term. And that's what we need to get into, that real, the so what factor, which we've probably been lacking because we've been almost firefighting, trying to do too much, and we just don't have the resource to do all the 130 projects that were identified. So I think, you know, it's a fair point to raise, and something that we are addressing under the new governance structure that will deliver.
Hopefully by the time we come back to this in about 6 months and things may have calmed down a bit from COVID, we'll be able to look at those metrics and maybe start to examine how you're doing against them. Roger, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It was just a couple of points, really. Truisms, really. There is no funding other than very, very small pots of money for the PSB. So we're doing all this within existing stretch budgets, and we have all have our own sort of statutory duties on top of everything else that the PSB is trying to do. So that's not a criticism, it's just an observation. It's a truism that we all got to manage in and around. We have pleaded with Welsh Government for sort of ring-fenced or hypothecated funding that could be used on a sort of collaborative basis, but nothing's been forthcoming at the moment. So that's the first point. And the other thing, I think, and I totally accept the issue around some of the metrics. A lot of the feedback and the outputs have been probably qualitative in nature as opposed to quantitative, so they are quite difficult to actually articulate and put down. So it's more of a sense of what has happened, and rather than saying X amount or this percentage change. So it's I think it's probably more challenging, and these are long term. So we are not sometimes we're not going to see some of these benefits for a you know, in the medium to long term going down in the future. So thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Hopefully, I mean, I'm just wondering, once these joint committees get set up, is going to be any resource for them as well? So, you know, and how's that going to impact on what resources you have for this? But we'll have to see that as it comes forward, I suppose. Chris Holly.
Thank you very much, Chair. A couple of things, and I'll try and be very brief. First of all these various boards stand on one another's shoulders. Local service boards was developed. We had success with the team around the child and what have you. And I think to give Lyndon and Paxton and many others an opportunity to examine what collaborative work really is like, they should have looked at what happened at the Forest fire with the tyre fire that was up there. Now that was real collaborative work, and I know it was under Silver Command and then eventually under Gold Command, but the local service board at the time had a huge input into that. And that worked, and that worked extremely well. Do we have to have performance indicators on this? I don't know if you can. And one of the reasons is the original idea of the local service board, performance, and the public service board was to come forward with ideas that would improve in time the areas of greatest neglect, and those are areas that were set out many years ago. Super outputs and what have you, all that data is available, and how we would improve those areas. And I don't think you can do it in 2 years, 3 years, 10 years it'll take. And even then, you will have to have, it depends on the cohorts that you look at and as you go through. If any of you have been governors for any length of time, you will have learnt the lesson that HMI used to say, and that was that every year you inspect schools, but because the children change every year, it might not improve, but it certainly is the idea that it doesn't go backwards. So the Public Service Board, in my opinion, is generally a board that sets to discuss and to evaluate what they can and cannot do. But I think it's more important that when they do this evaluation, they come back and explain to members what the metrics is, what they're doing, how they're doing it, and on what timescale they're doing it. The one thing I did take up on what Roger Thomas, the Deputy Chief Fire Officer, said, and that was about budgets. Because whenever you talk about joint working, regardless of what organisations you are, it's about budgets. And I'm quite surprised that we haven't had any funding from Welsh Government, which was promised many, many years ago for these organisations. Whether it's COVID or not, I don't know. But I would press the fact that we need to see funding before we go any further and before we see any major improvements on it. Thank you.
Okay. Adam, do you want to come on this or Roger?
Yeah, I'll start, and then Roger may want to add as well. Just in terms of, so Welsh Government did give a small amount of funding in order to help administer PSBs, but it wasn't a lot. It certainly didn't help with anything in terms of delivery, but did at least give us an administration function. That ceased at this year, so we get no funding now at all from Welsh Government to support the PSBs. Again, not going back and sort of repeating, but the governance model is set up in order to, we all share the load, and Roger's quite right in terms of, Roger within one of the work streams and the fire service pick up the administration costs and functionality of delivering on that work stream as the other three partners do also. But it is a stretched budget. In order to make a real difference, an injection of real money would be very beneficial in order to be able to, for the PSB to at least move forward. However, I'm always impressed by what we can seem to achieve, and just looking at the annual plan, going through the detail that has been there, and it is as much qualitative really more than it is quantitative, as Roger said, but there's an amazing amount of work there, and I think we shouldn't lose sight of that, because we can always argue that we need money and we need this, but actually part of the remit of the PSB is to work better together and utilize existing resources more effectively and more efficiently, and I think we've demonstrated that. I think it's the next leap though that needs probably that cash injection in order to get us from just that co-production into a real new area of making those changes that you've heard about and you've identified. A generational change takes more than just working together, and hopefully in the fullness of time and after COVID and budgets get realigned, there may be more budget to come in the future, but we will continue to lobby for funding wherever we can.
Chris mentioned pooled budget. I guess if you move towards pooled budgets, you'd also then be talking about a joint service delivery as well, which sort of seems to go slightly different direction to where you're going at the moment. Would that be fair, Adam?
Yeah, we did discuss pooled budgets. We went right through that, and as a PSB, and the difficulty is that much of what we currently have is already committed. So to make that leap over the longer term, most people are battling with the budget constraints as they are today. And we need to live for today before we can look about tomorrow. And I think that's the rub at the moment. To reinvest that money would mean stopping doing something now in order to look at that longer term. And that's where I talk about it would be good to have a resource externally, perhaps from Welsh Government or UK Government, wherever really, that would put that money in, that would enable us to have a big project. And I suppose we've seen that just more recently with Natural Resources Wales identified a pot of £25,000 that came into the PSB for us to work together with. So that was new money that we could then allocate and bid for, of which one of the projects I talked about in terms of the fire break. So that is there. However, again, we don't have the mechanism, and what I wouldn't want to set up is a bureaucratic process for a small amount of money to then try and work out how we spend it and get agreement and move forward. So I think until there is a bigger pot of external funding coming in, it's much better to utilise the human resource as well as the small amount of resources that partners have in order to deliver the projects that we currently do.
Unless the pool budget is actually going to introduce efficiencies, such as example, health service, health care and social care, which has been talked about for some time now, which a pool budget there may well introduce efficiencies and have a more effective service.
But then I think we also need to think about how does that all sit. So health and social care have the area planning board. So that's not the PSB. So we don't want to duplicate. The APB picks that up and deals with it. So if they need to look at pooled in order to look at that, then that's for them to look at. That's not our remit as the PSB. So the same as the regional planning board. We have a dotted line to them for substance misuse and so on. So we just need to think about what area it is, and I think Lyndon mentioned earlier in terms of we don't want to duplicate. The PSB has set itself its targets based on what we can deliver, and so a pool budget for us at the current time wouldn't add value from the members. We already have the health board sat on here as well as one of the statutory partners, and again it's the money needs to be allocated to the right areas, and in that case it's not the PSB.
Okay, Roger.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to bring back on the point Councillor Holly raised, I was Silver Commander for that the Forest fire some years ago, and I think collaboration kicked off with yourself pulling us around the table and telling us to sort it all out quickly. So good to see you again.
Yeah, I think that I remember that, Roger.
That's right. Some 9 years ago, do you believe? Yeah, 2011.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just to touch on the point about pool budgets, I think one of the challenges we've got, obviously, as I mentioned, us covering 6 PSBs, NRW covering, I think there's 19 in Wales now, I think 3 have merged. So I think the challenge is, and to be fair, NRW have put forward a sum of money into all PSBs, £25,000, as Adam touched on earlier, which is not a great deal of money, but it's something to work on. But other than that, we are scratching around really and trying to find things from existing funding. So that's the challenge. Pool budgets, if we were to do something in the Swansea area, we'd have to then probably replicate that across. So it becomes a bigger issue, certainly for those who are covering more than one PSB. Thanks.
Okay, you okay, Chris? Yeah. Okay, right.
It's that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, Paxton, you're muted. Paxton, you're muted.
My apologies. I thought I'd unmuted it myself. But just to come back on something that Chris said, and it's just been mentioned about the fire up in Forest Fach. My understanding was LSBs and PSBs were supposed to be about long-term working, not short-term working, and that was very much a short-term exercise to resolve that situation. And okay, cooperation is fine, and obviously there has to be between services at that point in time when you have something of that nature. But I don't see as that is a particularly good example, I have to say, for either LSBs or PSBs. And in essence, in terms of talking about pool budgets, I've said for a long time within the scrutiny panel that I think until we see pool budgets be coming in for specific projects, whether it's between the health service and the council, where they put money together to resolve problems or whatever, until we start seeing pool budgets, then we're not going to be seeing full cooperation of the various partners working together. And that's a matter of concern as far as I'm concerned, because obviously we're all in the same business. We all want the same thing for the benefit for the people that we represent. It's as simple as that. And it's a matter of making sure that we spend the money that we take from them as effectively as possible to provide those services. But certainly in terms of what I I said in respect of Chris and the fire, it was a short-term project. That was only, I don't know how long your control was in place for, but that was it basically. Okay, yeah. Thank you, Chairman.
I'm going to take that as a point rather than a question and move on to Lyndon. No,
I did mention pool budgets though, Chairman.
I know, but we've dealt with pool budgets. I'm going to move on to Lyndon next.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just going to, if I could come back to Adam there, because he mentioned he had a small budget for the PSB. Are we allowed to know what that budget was in terms of money? And also, I think Roger mentioned there may be small budgets, but even everything has a hidden cost, and that would be officer time and so on. So everything is a hidden cost. So sometimes a small budget can become a big budget.
Okay. If I can, in terms of the it was 45,000 that we got annually to deliver the things like the annual plan and to help with some of the admin. But that's now ceased. And if I can just take a liberty and just talk about just what was mentioned, I think it was by Paxton about short term. One of the things that the PSB does build is relationships, and they need to be long term, and that was the strength. So I wasn't here for the Forest Park fire, but what I have been here for is a number of civil contingencies matters, whether that be flooding, fires, all kinds of things, and the relationships that are built are strengthened because of the PSB. And so I know I have a direct line to, whether it be to Roger or whether it be the health board or the fire or the police service or whoever it may be, on the back of the PSB to strengthen those relationships, which will last over that long term. And during more difficult and longer term functions, we can pull those together. And it is about the building of relationships. Okay, Roger.
Yeah, I was going to say, whilst the response phase of the Forest Park fire was very much in the short term, the recovery phase was certainly long term in terms of epidemiological studies on health, on the public health impact, and also then the learning that came out of that in terms of waste management, issues around Swansea and enforcement. There was a lot of things that have developed out of that in terms of ensuring that we don't have a recurrence of that. So yeah, I always accept the response phase is relatively short. The recovery is certainly medium into long term in terms of the learning.
Okay, I'm anxious to move on. So Chris and Paxton, you'll make this short.
I just going to reinforce what Roger just said, because the learning afterwards went on for about 5 or 6 years. And I think Roger will agree with me that the video that was shot during the course of it has now been used across the world as an excellent way of putting out these type of fires. So I think it was a long-term project.
Okay, Paxton.
Yes, I've no doubt there are lessons that came out of that. Working together, collaboration together at that point in time was purely and simply a short-term thing. Obviously, the learning after that does take further time, I must admit, but that was been done really at your leisure when it was convenient to do it, rather than at a point in time when there was something that immediate that needed something done at that time to solve the problem.
Okay, right, Peter Jones, you've been very quiet. Do you want to raise your point about the greener agenda, the environmental agenda?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I was listening, fascinated, of course, to the lengthy discussion. I've got an interesting background in relation to this, because back in 2013, 2014, I was a member of a small NGO group, green NGOs, that was revising the government on the development of the Wellbeing Act. And for my sins, my particular responsibility, the public services boards, and I was expected to lead for that group on these. And I was very enthusiastic about the inclusion of PSBs within the Wellbeing Act, and not least because at the time, our understanding was that PSBs would bring together collaborating local authorities across shared areas of interest, including, of course, the natural environment, in which I had a particular interest. And I lobbied very hard, in fact, to get beyond NRW, to get an independent environmental representative by statute onto the PSBs, but I think we were unsuccessful. I was unsuccessful in that regard. But I was an enthusiast. But I now sit on the Working with Nature task group and have done for the last 2.5 or 3 years, or whatever it's been that we've been working on that particular well-being theme. And I'm afraid purely from the experience I've had with working on that particular group, my view has changed. Because what I found very early on in that group, that what it was doing, I hate to say this, was duplicating what the council and others were already doing. And I fail, in spite of my best endeavours, to see what it is that what my Working with Nature group, which includes NRW, a number of other NGOs and the Environment Centre, Swansea Environment Forum and so forth, I fail to see what it was going to deliver or has delivered that wouldn't have happened anyway, not least because of our new wellbeing objective for natural resources and biodiversity within the corporate plan, which in fact is more detailed and more extensive than anything I think that the Working with Nature group was likely to come up with. Now that's not to rubbish, therefore, collaborative or that kind of working, but it is for co-production working. But my experience is that what we have been doing on the Working with Nature group, we would have done perfectly well informally, working as necessary with NRW, with the Tree Forum, for example, and so forth. So I've developed a rather sceptical, I'm not jaundiced, I'm not hostile, but I've developed a rather sceptical view of the value of the PSP just based on my own experience, as I say, under the Working with Nature head. Having said that, I do just have one, therefore, overriding question that in a sense follows on from my experience, and that is, what would be the biggest and most serious consequence of not having a PSP? In other words, if we abolish the PSP tomorrow, what would we notice in terms of a lost opportunity? Thank you, Chair.
Who's coming in that, Adam? Oh, Andrea's indicated. Okay, Andrea.
Yeah, if I can come in on the first part about value and about the PSB's value in terms of improving the environment, tackling climate change. This isn't a new item for the PSB, but it's fair to say that the new priorities will take a new focus and a slightly different direction. And what we're trying to do, Peter, is identify those areas where we can co-produce, we can collaborate with PSB partners and add value to what the council are doing, add value to what they are doing, because clearly the Act means that they all, as bodies, public sector bodies, we're all instructed to act in the best interest of the environment and future generations and should be doing so. But what we're looking at in terms of bringing it to the PSB as an item is that where things can cross over and we can collaborate on certain areas and share good practice as well, because since we've signed up for the climate change and tackling climate change as an emergency, we've set ourselves a deadline. We're going to put in place, as you know, a carbon measurement tool so that we can measure where we currently are. And we talked about measuring outcomes earlier, so that we can measure what the outcomes are and that we're on the journey to reach net carbon zero. And I'm sure that we'd be happy to share that tool with public sector partners on the PSB so that they can benefit from that, measure where they are and see where they are on the journey. But I see there are a lot of opportunities for us. And Adam mentioned and Roger has referred to the stronger partnerships that we have as a result of the PSB. And I think those strengthened partnerships will come into their own when it comes to us addressing issues such as climate change. And I don't think that those partnerships would necessarily be as strong if we didn't have the PSB. And that comes to your second question about the value of PSBs. I think they do add value. And I look forward, as I said, to bringing back future reports to prove that value to the Scrutiny Committee and show what we can do when we combine our efforts.
Can I just come back quickly on that, Chair?
Yeah, please do.
Quickly. I welcome very much what Andrea has just said in relation in particular to wildlife and climate change. These are clearly two areas in particular where I think there's a potential role for a body like the PSB to play. As I said earlier, I don't think it's necessarily been the case up to now, but I can certainly see the case for collaborative working, and I hope that she is right in her judgment. But thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, do you have any more questions from anybody at all on this issue? No, I'm going to give you a few seconds. No? Okay, can I thank Adam, Andrea, Roger and Clive, who's now left, of course, for coming along to answer questions on this. It's been very much appreciated and very interesting, and I'm sure that a lot of those who haven't been previously involved in scrutinising the PSB have learned a great deal about it. And as I said, we'll come back to you in about 6 months, and hopefully things will have calmed down a bit then, and we'll be able to take a more sort of step back a bit from the current crisis and be able to take a more leisurely view of the work you're doing, and maybe look at the metrics which Adam referred to, and see how we can pin down, you know, the effectiveness of the PSB for the future. But I understand that everyone is under huge amounts of strain and pressure at the moment, and that's may not be the most appropriate time to do that. So thank you very much indeed for coming along for this particular session. It's been much appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on now to the Scrutiny Performance Panel Progress Report. We may do a letter to the Chair, by the way, just reflecting the discussion as well. So do that. So the Scrutiny Performance Panel Progress Report. These are we're going to. I think Lyndon's going to talk us through the report on the Education Panel. Lyndon, do you want to add to the report that's been circulated?
Just a few things, Chair. Is one of the things that the panel are really concerned about, and as you know, and that is the underperformance of children on free school meals, and that is something we are looking at and we get updated on a regular basis, because we all feel that these children we need to inspire to really have a proper education and build for the future. The other thing I would say is that we did take the opportunity at our meeting before last to send a letter out to all teachers and staff working in the education department to say thank you for the work that they've done, because they have been absolutely tremendous during the course of the pandemic, because they had to learn a lot of new skills, you know, with blended learning. They had to learn them very, very quickly, and really did really well. We have as well got a slight change in our programme. For the next few months, our meeting next week is about we're meeting up with the Swansea Skills Partnership, and we're getting an update on education and the schools' recovery from COVID and the annual audit of schools. But for the next two, we're going to have a verbal update from the staff at the education department, because we really don't want to put extra pressure on schools where they are already under pressure delivering education at the moment in a very difficult environment. So we've got a number of school virtual visits, and that will be Penrowell and Morriston, but that we're going to fit those in later into the programme.
Thank you, Lyndon. Obviously, you don't want to do anything too intensive at the moment for the reasons you've already suggested. When you're looking at the free school meals underperformance, will you be looking at the impact of the pupil development grant on where that's actually working locally?
That we will do. It as I say, it's something we are concerned about, because if you look at the performance figures, and when we saw, we went to One Wen School, you know, where we had a meeting with them a little while ago, and we could see that, you know, the work that had to be done and the challenges that those children faced. So yes, the answer is yes.
Okay. Anybody else got any points on to raise with Lyndon on this panel's performance? Okay, thank you very much, Lyndon. That's much appreciated.
Okay.
Item 8 is membership of scrutiny panels and working groups. We just need to agree the work programme as it's set out in the agenda. Are we happy with that? June, do you want to come in on this?
Yes, Chair. I'll contact Bridge later to join one of the panels. But I noticed in the proposed panel and working groups that the conveners have already been selected. Surely it is for those working groups to elect their convener or chairman rather than this committee.
Bridge, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, Chair. So it's the role of the Scrutiny Programme Committee to determine membership and conveners. The only variance to that rule, if you like, that you've employed is asking for performance panels to appoint their convener at the start of each municipal year, given that these panels are ongoing. Some of them have met for a number of years now. So in terms of, an inquiry, a working group, which would be a one-off meeting, it's you haven't considered that to be prudent or necessary to leave that to that event. It's something that the committee has to decide, so that we can then work with that convener and work with that group to deliver that scrutiny activity. So the appendix you see in there is for the committee's agreement on the work that is going to be started, that's consequential to the new work programme which you have agreed. It's only the performance panels, which you have invited performance panels to meet at the first meeting each municipal year and simply report back. So that was done at the last meeting. So you're effectively kind of just rubber stamping that and accepting that those conveners of performance panels are as per the performance panel's wishes. So it is a role for the committee to agree that membership and convener.
Yeah, but there is a fairly good cross-party approach on the conveners, June.
Yeah, but can I come back on that?
Yeah.
I'm talking about the new panels, so they haven't been in existence, and I would disagree, but I'll check elsewhere.
Okay, because as Bridge says, it's normally for us to appoint the conveners for these one-off inquiries and stuff, as opposed to the performance panels, which do elect their own chairs. I mean, I'm more in favour of them electing their own chairs, but with the one-off thing, you do need to get someone to sort of focus everything and get it all together. And sometimes it's the person who comes forward with the idea who we say, will you do it? But if you have other people who want to do it, then please let us know. But at this stage, we do have a good cross-party approach to that as well. Paxton, do you want to come in on this issue?
Yes, while we're talking about the work programme, just for members to be aware, we have quite severely truncated the agenda tomorrow for the joint social services scrutiny panel. That's obviously because of the situation that's arising in Swansea at the moment, and we will continue, Sue and myself will continue to work closely with the management and the cabinet members to ensure that we minimise the workload at this time on senior officers and the cabinet members while they're dealing with this. Just for the committee to be aware of it.
Yeah, thanks. And I think Lyndon's panel has got the same issue as well in terms of workload as well. So obviously we're doing our best to accommodate the tremendous pressure which all the officers are under, and obviously we need to take account of that and show our gratitude for the work they're doing, because it's been absolutely outstanding the way they've responded to this. Peter.
Yes, just on this point, as I think you will know, Chair, the Natural Environment Performance Panel was due to meet on Monday, and cancelled that meeting at the request of the leader because of the pressure that it would have placed. It would have required 4 cabinet members to attend that meeting in order to cover the business that it was required to cover. So what we did do, we had a pre-meeting planned anyway for the previous Friday. We had that pre-meeting, if you like, but without officers, and we covered quite a bit of the agenda, and there will be a follow-up report from that meeting. But again, we were responsive to the pressures on officers over COVID.
That'll teach you to try to monopolise the cabinet.
Thank you, Chair.
Right, thanks for that. Right, okay. So can we accept that report, everybody? Okay, so we move on to item 9, which is a scrutiny work programme. You'll note that before we come into people on amazing points, the work programme will be subject to requests for scrutiny throughout the year. There's already been a request made in terms of the transfer of land to Mumbles Community Council, which we'll obviously visit just before the cabinet meeting, which discusses that. I mean, we're only going to be asking questions. We don't have the power to undo these decisions, but we will be obviously scrutinising that. And we have had a public request for work regarding the bridleway at Clyde Valley Woods, which we've referred to the cabinet member at this stage anyway. There's nothing on cabinet which we can call in to look at that. And work plans for all the performance panels are provided for committees' awareness. And also, I think, as I said in the pre-meeting, there are a number of topics listed to fit into the work plan to ensure that we get a good coverage of cabinet members over the next 18 months, to make sure that we try to make sure that everyone's going to be questioned on something or other in relation to the portfolio, focusing on particular issues as opposed to the wide range of portfolio, so we can get better focus on the work they're doing. So anybody got any points you want to raise on this at all? No? Okay, thank you. So we'll take that as read then.
Oh.
Who's that? Oh, Christopher Holly.
Yeah, on 2.23 in the report, where it goes about the cabinet members' questions at the leader, economic finance strategy, Councillor Rob Stewart, focus on COVID, budget, Brexit, partnership, working including the Western Gateway, etc. The finance and performance scrutiny is looking at the budget around that time, so I'm not sure whether you want to take the budget out of there because that's already going to be discussed. Or
which paragraph is Chris? So I didn't catch that.
It's on 2.23.
Chair, it's about the Q&A session with the leader planned for January. So
okay.
It's really a hint really to the leader at the sort of things that the committee might want to ask about. Yeah. Obviously not in the depth that the service improvement and finance will go into. It's entirely up to you whether you want me to tell the leader that actually the committee won't be asking anything about the budget, or just leave it. If you want to ask questions, you can. If not, then that'll be a matter for the committee to raise. He may want to obviously highlight some things around the budget, of course, but obviously in brief.
I'm keen to let the committee have its reign, if that's okay with you, Chris, and I'm sure you want to go into more detail.
I don't care. It's just I thought, well, people.
Well, you'll be looking at some more detail on that anyway, so that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay. So item 10 is the scrutiny letters for information, and then item 11, the date and time for upcoming scrutiny panel meetings, also for information. So that's it. The next meeting is on Tuesday, the 19th of January at 4 p.m. Can I thank you all for your participation? Thank all the officers for the work and support they've given us over the last year. And can I wish you all a Merry Christmas and a happy and safe New Year? Thank you very much indeed.
Same to you. Yeah. Bye.